I'm sure there's been a moment in your life when you've been driving or riding in a car and up ahead appears to be a puddle of water that magically disappears. Or maybe if you live in a desert and have gotten thirsty looking for a drink, water has spawned right in front of you. Well, this is not water actually, and it's called a mirage, as most of you probably know, but I like to call it nature's clickbait, and these are actually more interesting than you think. Also, shout out to 3DS Larry for recommending this video. So let's start with the surface level information. As the ground gets hot, it heats up some of the air above it, and cooler air stays above this heated air. As sunlight tries to reach the Earth's surface, it sort of bends as it passes through these different layers of air, and this bending makes the light move in a way where it appears as if there's water. Now I know what you're thinking. That's it. That's the video. Why didn't I just make it short? Well, I'm kind of insane, and I can turn any topic into a long video because I'm a nerd and I have the most random stuff to talk about. So let's begin. So I could just be simple and leave it at that, saying the light bends and that makes it look like water. But what the heck does that even mean? How does light bend? What even is light? And how does it make it look like water? This doesn't even make sense. I'm sure you've had a similar experience. You're sitting in class, specifically science class, you hear something and you're like, okay, it kind of makes sense, but how exactly? This is a similar thought problem I have with technology, and I kind of talk more about that in this video. Basically, just I can accept that, Wi-Fi works, but how? It's crazy. Anyway, if you want to hear more yapping about that, go watch that video. So first I'm going to explain more about light bending or refraction. So light is constantly traveling, and it travels at 670,616,629 miles per hour. And as it travels through different things such as air versus glass, it changes speed slightly, and depending on if it's changing from fast to slow or slow to fast determines if the light will bend towards or away from the surface that it's passing through. So back to the mirages specifically, this bending of light can sometimes look like water because the hot air above the road is getting reflected onto the road, and as the light goes through it, we see the reflection of the hot air and all the light bending and distortion that makes it look like water, if that makes sense. Maybe. I don't know. Anyway, there's more about light that I want to talk about. This video isn't just about mirages, but trust me, it will tie back into it by the end. So let's get into light and explaining what even is light. It's such a simple thing that we're so used to. So light is a form of electromagnetic radiation that's visible to the eye. And I've gone more in depth into that whole spectrum in multiple other videos. I think multiple. I'm going to pop them up on the screen. It might be one or two. I don't know. But to sum it up, light falls in the section of the spectrum that is visible to us. And light isn't just a wave though. It's also a particle. So first, more about the wave side of it. Light waves determine colors. This is actually very interesting. In my opinion, it is. So if you're getting bored, just bear with me. So like I said, light waves determine colors, and specifically the length of the light waves. So for example, shorter wavelengths will correspond with blues, while longer wavelengths will correlate to red, those sort of lighter colors. You may have heard this before, and yeah, that may make sense. And kind of like I was talking about a minute ago, you can accept that it makes sense, I guess, but like, what does that even mean? How do you even measure a wavelength if you can't see it? It's all very confusing, and I'm telling you, what I'm about to tell you is something I bet you have never learned in school. So the whole thing with lengths and determining the length of wavelengths, or determining the lengths of waves of colors, it depends on the material of whatever the light is going through and how that light interacts with it. And it's not specifically like if something's made of copper, it's more of the atomic material. I'm talking about electrons, because certain materials have different electron configurations. Those different electron configurations absorb different color and reflect only one color, which is what we see. If you didn't know, anytime you see a color, it's not because that object is absorbing only that color. It's actually, we're seeing the reflection of the color that it can't absorb. Now, I'm going to give an example of this because I know some of you may be confused or have some questions, like I originally did when I was researching this. Now, the reason two identical Lego blocks can be different colors isn't due to the physical plastic material, but rather the coating around it that's been modified to have specific electrons that absorb all colors but one. And how you do this is by controlling the electronic structure of the pigments in the paint or whatever you're coloring something with. And that's as far as my knowledge goes, because when you get too deep in this nerdy stuff, you start to realize no one really knows what the heck's going on, and things are just the way they are. Now onto the particle side of light. Now first I must say the wave and particle aspects of light aren't separated, but rather light travels in a wave of multiple particles. The only reason I point it out is because it's kind of unusual compared to other things that have a wave type form, such as sound waves, because you can't see sound. Maybe you can if you're on acid. But since light exists in particles all around us and no colors would exist without light, this means that any movie or show that you've seen where someone can pause time is totally inaccurate. Not because the person can pause time, but the fact that if they did pause time, light would also pause and everything would go dark. It'd be pretty terrifying. Now, while it may seem like I'm just having a schizophrenic episode, this video, like I said, I promise this is all connected. Let's go back to what I was just saying about how color is made and how it's the specific electrons that determine this color. Well, back to the mirages, air is transparent, as we know, which is because in the electromagnetic spectrum, visible light has a very specific energy level of photons, and air is just a combination of nitrogen and oxygen, which are very simple in nature and fall short of this visible range. And since light cannot reflect any visible color from air, it instead reflects the heat waves, which get reflected onto the road. That's another reason it looks like water. It's very weird, but our brains shouldn't actually be able to see heat waves, and that's why if you look anything up about humans being able to visibly see heat waves, it's considered a phenomenon because scientists don't know why we are able to see them. It's a similar thing with, like, if you're looking at a candle or a fire pit and you see the little squiggly air above it, that's heat waves, and those shouldn't naturally be visible to the human eye. But yeah, this water-like visual on the road is simply just our brain's interpretation of heat waves reflected by light. Thank you all for watching this video. If you made it to the end and you enjoy this video, make sure to leave a like and please subscribe to the channel if you want to see more content like this. Let me know if you enjoyed this video in the comments. Let me know if it was a little too nerdy for you. If you made it to the end, at least I'm happy that it was somewhat entertaining. It's funny because I'm not trying to boost my ego or anything, but I've always done pretty well in school. But at the same time, I've always hated doing a lot of work, especially science stuff. Like, I've always hated doing science. But now that I'm out of school, doing research yourself and not being forced to do work, and when you can look it up in your free time, it's actually really interesting. Comment down below any recommendations for other videos, because like this one and these other ones, they were recommended for me to make. This video right here about Unit 731, I hadn't even heard of this until this guy commented, and I made a whole video. I spent weeks researching. It's one of my proudest videos that I made. This one and this one are. And with that being said, I'll see you on the next video. Thanks for watching.